Technology. It allows us to experience better and better games, or it should. Now it mainly lets us play Call of Duty in higher resolutions, but there was a time when technologies actually innovated video games. They changed them fundamentally, and it would seem like they would be the future. They would allow us to create more interesting games that gave us an experience that was in no way achievable before those technologies were created. And then they vanished. And these are the top 7 innovative gaming technologies that are now dead. A show dedicated to remembering the technologies that shaped video games and at one time may have been able to actually push video games even further, but they didn't. Now, I'm not talking about things that promised to change video games forever and then never delivered even a functional demo or a technical specification like the thing on the background. No, I'm actually talking about technology that existed, was used, and then went kaput. Technology that actually did something and was either abandoned because, well, we kinda grew out of it, or because of the Illuminati. That being said, let's get it started with number 7, full motion video. You're gonna say, but people still use full motion video. Yes, but very, very rarely. There's like 3 games that have used it, like 3 games that I know of. 3 games that people have heard of in general that have used it in the past 3 years. And they didn't use it ironically, they just used it. Full motion video was a big thing back in the day because it let people experience graphics that could not be achieved then with computers. It used video to record actual actors, and it used sometimes even sets to give a game a sense of realism that the graphics at that time could not achieve. It gave those games a certain sense of style and really encouraged people to get a CD-ROM. There's examples of full motion video being used to fantastic effect in games like The Seventh Guest, the Phantasmagoria series, portions of the Wing Commander series, and a lot of other things. But as graphics technology evolved, FMV was replaced by CGI. Which isn't really a bad thing, it's just that FMVs had a certain charm to them, and they did really push the visual component of games further than graphics could actually do at that time. And it was also a very good excuse to get famous actors into ridiculous costumes for story reasons. Number 6, iMuse. If you don't know what iMuse is, you're probably missing out on a very, very pleasant experience. You see, in most games today, music is formed out of several samples that are changed together and changed in between each other depending on the situation. If it's combat, it'll play the combat track. If it's exploration, it'll play the exploration track, and so on. And the transition between them tends to be a bit abrupt most of the time. iMuse fixed that. Michael Land and Peter McConnell of LucasArts developed a system that was able to actually take the role of an orchestra. And I don't mean that it played music, it behaved like an orchestra. One that could understand what music to play, when to play it, and how to switch to a new track. This meant that depending on the situation, on the scene you were in, some instruments from the soundtrack would not be heard, thus giving the music a different feel to it. When it came time to transition to the full version, it would do so seamlessly, giving the music again a different feel. When it came to transitioning to an entirely new song, it would do it by keeping the same tempo, by switching it up so slightly that you would not get whiplash from the transition. It would not have something akin to a climactic ending to one song and then the abrupt beginning of another one. It would be a seamless transition, and this really made LucasArts games stand apart. In terms of music, you could really not equal something like Monkey Island 2 LeChuck's Revenge. At the time, of course. Similar ideas have been implemented in some video games, but for the most part, games today use gigantic scores recorded by symphonies that just don't really mesh that well together. And it really doesn't suit the experience most of the time. iMuse should make a comeback. Number 5, motion controls. We still don't have a motion control game where you have a lightsaber that you can use to fight people, or an actual sword combat game with motion controls. You remember motion controls, right? Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo promised heaven and earth and never actually delivered. Well, no, wait. Nintendo never actually promised heaven and earth. They just gave us motion controls and some games with it. Nintendo actually did it right because they never overpromised. Sony didn't really do that much with its motion controls. Microsoft lied a lot about the Kinect and what its motion control functionality could actually do. In the end, we didn't get anything. This was supposed to be something that could innovate games. You could have a Jedi Knight game where you could wield the saber and actually fight one-on-one with your opponents. But we never got that. The closest thing to that we ever got was a mobile phone app that tied into Chrome and that let you sort of swing a lightsaber on your computer. It was very clunky and, well, not really what you expected to get. And it's not like the technology wasn't there. With the Wii Motion Plus, you got a very good accuracy to your movement to the point where people were hacking the Wii Motion Plus on the PC and making homebrew Jedi Sims where you could actually swing a lightsaber around with a fair fair bit of accuracy. Sadly, this did not actually translate into games that could have been, better. But it did make that promise. And that promise was shown in the things that indie developers and just enthusiasts were coming up with. Sadly, you needed peripherals for that, and well, those peripherals needed official support to actually get any sort of traction to convince game developers to make, a PC Wii Motion Plus game. Though to be fair, motion controls are making a comeback now with VR, especially thanks to the Vive and to the new Oculus Touch controller. It won't make a lick of difference for non-VR games, but still it's something. Number 4. Euphoria. When this technology came out, it looked amazing. This would allow an AI system, an NPC, a character in a game, a player character, anything in a game that was humanoid to behave like an actual human. It could grab onto things, it could react to things, it could stagger, it could get up, it could roll, it could do so many reactions, and it was just amazing. You remember it, right? It was that demonstration for The Force Unleashed, it was in GTA 4, and then it kind of disappeared. The technology sort of died out. Some say that it is present in GTA 5, but comparing what's in GTA 5 to GTA 4 sort of paints a different picture, especially since people have actually tried to mod Euphoria into GTA 5 and have shown significantly better behavior from characters. Very few games actually used Euphoria. There were mostly those developed by Rockstar. And it's such a shame because this technology would allow the creation of very, very detailed characters. Characters that could move, that could react, that could grab onto things, that could do stuff. Characters that but looked so alive. But, well, now the company that developed this technology, called Natural Motion, is owned by Zynga. You know Zynga, right? Zynga, the death march of mobile gaming. So Euphoria will probably rot there until the end of eternity. Or maybe someone picks it up after Zynga goes belly up. Number 3. Digital Molecular Matter, or DMM. I happen to have a very personal relationship with this technology because I was studying the underlying element of it at college when it started to come out. DMM is based on finite element analysis, which is something that's really awesome but takes a whole bunch of processing power to do. It's basically using numbers to simulate material properties of metal, of wood, of how it bends, of how it breaks, how it resists to tension. It can even be applied to air, to particles in the air, and it's amazing. And the people at Pixelux developed a way to implement finite element analysis into real-time calculations, which could work for video games. Granted, it wasn't something absolutely perfect, like the development demonstrations they had showed generally very clunky and very big chunks for breakable objects and deformations, but then we saw the Force Unleashed demonstration, the one that showed how wood can be procedurally broken to look like wood. And again, this is something that in finite element analysis is quite common. All materials have parameters, you just enter them in FEMAP or any similar software you want, and you will simulate that material perfectly. The idea of being able to do this in a game is amazing. You could actually have materials that behave like they should. You could even melt things, theoretically I mean. And DMM was implemented in the Force Unleashed, where there were some very interesting effects there, but LucasArts sort of exclusively licensed the technology for a couple of years. They were to use it on The Force Unleashed, The Force Unleashed 2, and the Indiana Jones game that was never actually launched. So, in terms of video games, this technology died day one, mostly because of LucasArts. It continued to be used in movies. It's even used today in blockbusters to make very realistic effects. And it is actually implemented as a basic element of the Gamebryo engine. No, not the one that Bethesda used. I mean the main Gamebryo engine that's transformable into just about anything you need it to be. This technology could just crap all over physics. And I mean the NVIDIA physics things. It could crap all over it. It could make games with environments that are so realistic you could punch a tree and actually see splinters. And I mean real ones. Sure, they would fade after a while probably to keep the poly count low, but then that tree would actually be subject to its own internal stresses and forces, and it may fall over. Granted, you would have had to punch it really hard, but still, this technology could have been so much better used, but it never was, and currently it doesn't seem like it's actually being used actively in the development of any video game, and that is downright sad. Number 2, 6 Degrees of Freedom. Now, what exactly does 6 Degrees of Freedom mean? I mean, where can you go? You can go up, you can go down, you can go left, you can go right. Can you go diagonally? Is that the 6th degree of freedom? Well, no. 6 degrees of freedom refers to up, down, left, right, back, forward, yaw, where you rotate left to right, roll, where you rotate up to down, and pitch, where you rotate the forward. So look at this picture and you'll get it. That's 6 degrees of freedom. And this was amazing to have in games like Descent. The ability to move in a 3D space without without any sort of limitations. You may be saying to yourself, well, wait a minute, this technology is still around. Every game is 3D and every game lets you have 6 degrees of freedom now. No. Oh, hell no. And I can tell you this for certain because the underlying technology of these games is for the most part not meant to support 6 degrees of freedom. People that are developing games on Unreal Engine 4 and even CryEngine had to very much modify them in order to support 6 degrees of freedom. Because actually just looking up or looking at your feet in games made with these engines wasn't something really intended. The camera system would go all wonky the closer you got to looking directly down and would just go crazy if you looked a bit backwards. Now you could blame this on the fact that a lot of these engines were made to work for consoles as well, and verticality in consoles is like verticality in consoles. That's why snipers aren't that great in something like Overwatch on the console, but on PC, oh boy! Vertical aiming is where it's at. But it's also due to the fact that a lot of the video games we play now are still designed in 2D. They are made to be 2D games where you sometimes jump or go up slopes. You don't actually really move on a vertical axis or roll or yaw or, do any of that stuff. This sadly applies to even space games like Star Trek Online where you couldn't flip your own ship. But thankfully, this technology is being used again in games like Elite Dangerous, Star Citizen, the new Descent games, Space Engineers, and a bunch of others. But again, it's not something that you actually see in every game. Number 1. The Text Parser. In the beginning, games were simplistic. They had simple methods of input. They had simple methods of interaction with the environment. They did not actually have environments. They were a ball on a screen. There were shapes and colors and not much else. And then the text parser came along. Now you are no longer limited by what you could move on the screen with a joystick. You could talk to the game. You could order it. You could tell it what to do. You could tell your character to go north. You could tell your character to inspect a door, grab a key, fight a Grue, don't get eaten by a Grue, be digested by a Grue, and restart because you were eaten by a Grue. Now granted, this was a bit complex to actually work with because you had to type the verbs, the nouns, the pronouns, the everything into the game when you wanted to play it for every command. So that's why it got replaced by lists of verbs that the game knew what to do with, that you could see, that were more easily used. And then with time, even that list of verbs was forgotten. Which is a shame because a text parser, a very competent one, can allow for a degree of interaction with a game that is not achievable any other way. Voice recognition has never been and probably won't be for the next couple of years anywhere near as good to allow the kind of interaction you can have with a text parser in a game. Because you can program any number of words you want. You can define a meaning for them. You can define an interaction for them. You can do anything. And all the player needs to do is type them approximately correct. And a whole new world of possibilities opens up to you. A text parser still has a place in video games. And it should really try and make a comeback. And by that I mean the developers should try and put text parsers creatively back in games. Not for go north or check out door, but for interacting with characters. Like the game Facade, which is sort of like an interactive play where you make up your own lines, where you interact with two characters in a situation and you go with the flow. You change the story as you write your own lines, basically. It's the kind of idea that really should make a comeback because it's a game design element that offers so much more than a simple graphics upgrade to an existing idea. Well, that's it for the most innovative technologies in video games that kind of died, and in part should really make a comeback. If you have your own idea of what technology of the past should come back, please mention it in the comments. If you say Securum, I will stab you. Figuratively.
Thank you for watching this show. If you enjoyed it, please consider watching some of our other videos and maybe sharing them or giving a thumbs up if you feel like it. And if you really liked what you saw, please check out our Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you could help us make much better shows and get some rewards in the process. Or you could consider buying my book called Tale of Doom. Volume 1 is out now and available for just $2. And as always, if you thought it was horrible, you know where to find me and complain about it.